There
Unmuted.
we go. Yay, we
Oh,
did it.
sweet. We
Okay,
did
thank
it.
you.
Oh man, I just sat in a puddle.
Oh no.
One of those days.
Everything is going wrong.
But you're here
Um,
and I'm here.
Yay. Thank you for
Yeah.
coming. Welcome everyone back to the Cycling With Summit, which is a celebration of the bicycle and riders from all walks of life who are breaking down all kinds of barriers. My name is Annalisa, and I'm the founder and co-creator of Miles of Portraits, which is a magazine and a film about the people we meet as we ride our bikes around the world. It's kind of our favorite part of bicycle travel is the people, and that's also what the summit is highlighting. Before we begin, I just want to thank our Patreon supporters, all the brands that got behind this, and our presenting sponsors, Ortlieb and Rad Power Bikes, for making this summit possible. And by the way, Rad Power Bikes was only recently added to the list of presenting sponsors, thanks to Olivia. She works at the company, and she made the connection. So that was a great surprise a few days ago. So thank you to Rad Power Bikes. Today, I'm really excited to introduce my good friend, Olivia Round. Olivia has dedicated her life to elevating the stories of all female cyclists. She's an eloquent writer who turns her adventures into powerful stories that boost the upsides of vulnerability and encourage more women to ride bikes. So, Olivia, I'll let you take it away from here.
Thanks, Annalisa. That was a great intro. Thanks everybody for being here. I know this is being recorded and some of you are going to watch later, so that's great too. Today has been a really trying day, but it's kind of perfect. I have kind of a high level of anxiety in the past few weeks, and I also haven't been exactly sure where I'm going to sleep tomorrow night. We've been having some personal housing crisis. We tried to move to Eugene, Oregon, right when wildfires were happening, and COVID makes the housing market very tricky. So it's all very appropriate. That's very much my experience on bicycle tours, is not being sure where I'm going to sleep the next night and having kind of an elevated level of anxiety. And I know that doesn't make bicycle travel sound very attractive. So, but that's definitely been my experience, and there's a reason why I do it anyway. And that's a big part of this presentation, is cycling with fear. I love the cycling with name of this summit, that we carry things with us, we overcome things to ride the bike, we do it in spite of ourselves, and I am very much that person. So Annalisa did a great introduction. My name is Olivia Round. I'm very keenly interested in fear and adventure and the places where those two intersect, because for a lot of people who adventure, they know that fear is a regular companion on the journey. But if you haven't done particularly a solo adventure before, you might be thinking that fear and adventure are separate, that they do not hang out together, and that adventurers don't feel fear or are fearless people. And I'm here to say that's definitely not the case for me. So mostly this presentation is going to be talking about my own personal journey, because that's the most authority I have to speak on the subject, is my own story. But there are some kind of sciencey things I want to bring into it too, just because fear is a really interesting subject for the human experience. And they've done some studies on it, and it's a weirdo, and it affects a lot of our lives. So fear is just this feeling that something bad could happen. It's part of our biological evolutionary way to keep ourselves alive. So fear is very much a part of the human experience, and it's not going away anytime soon. And it doesn't have to keep us from living amazing lives or going on adventures. So, you know, the interesting thing about solo female travelers is that we are, in a way, a biological anomaly. And I'll talk a little bit about, like, studies that have been done and statistics, but please, if you do not resonate with these statistics, just ignore them. I don't mean to put anybody in a box. There's exceptions to every rule, so just don't worry about that part. Also, I am not a scientist, so this is just my own readings that I've done on other people's research. But overall, the human female brain is a little bit more risk averse. We're a little bit more hesitant to embark on dangerous quests. And I think that's very fascinating. We also have kind of a heightened anxiety ability. There's plenty of anxious males out there and people who don't identify as either one or both. But for females in particular, anxiety and being risk averse is something that is a pattern in generally the female brain. We're also seen culturally as perhaps weaker, more in need of protection, and also very close-knit with our friend groups, very social. You know, a lot of human female babies learn to speak earlier than male babies. We're just like a little bit more eager to connect with you. So all of these things culminate in it being kind of a strange thing that females want to travel alone. And I love that. I love that we are weird. And I personally love being exceptional. That's something that I've learned in my 31 years on Earth. I like being exceptional in some part of my life, not every part. I'm not a great cook. I am not a strong athlete. You know, like I'm not the best musician, but I like some part of what I do in my life to say like, wow, that's unique and different. She's pretty cool. That's something that's really important to me for me to feel okay in the world. And being a solo female traveler really offers that. When you go out in the world alone, it's people are kind of looking around to see where your partner is or like where your friend is, or in the case of my bicycle tour in 2011, where my parents were, because I looked really young. So people are looking for you to have a companion or a group or parents or something. And when you don't have those, there's kind of this vacuum. You see it in their eyes. There's this moment where they're like, holy crap, she's out here alone. You are. It's pretty cool. And it's okay. But it does require a lot of, well, for me, it requires a lot of effort. Solo travel for me is a full-time job. When I'm doing it, I feel like I'm working really hard and I'm very excited to go to bed at the end of the day. Like my brain has been working really hard to do constant risk assessment and try to calm down and plan my route and make sure I have enough food and water. It's a lot of responsibility to yourself. So even though you're not traveling with anyone else that you have to worry about, you have to think about yourself a lot. And that's something else I love about solo female travel. I think in many ways, we're taught that good people don't think about themselves too much, that we are going to extend ourselves and give and be really generous and help others, and you know, ask your guests if they'd like a glass of water or if anybody needs to use the restroom. And when you're solo traveling, you are forced to connect with yourself and see what your needs are and to see what schedule fits you best. And it's a really lonely feeling, but it's really powerful. And you only have to have really one solo travel experience to realize that that is going to flavor the way you treat yourself for the rest of your life. You are kind of forced to hang out with yourself intimately for weeks at a time, or even just overnight in a way that you haven't before. So the topic is cycling with fear. Those are kind of the non-personal reasons why this subject is interesting to me. And now we're going to jump into some very personal ones. So I was born and raised in a small town in Alaska. And my experience growing up in Alaska was very gendered. It really felt like girls versus boys all the time. And when I was looking at adults like my parents and other people in the community, I kind of saw that echoed still. It was a lot of males versus females. And I was not aware of like a broader gender spectrum until I got to college. So just for the sake of explaining my childhood, I'm going to refer to it as men and women. I apologize that I didn't have a broader spectrum of reference when I was younger. So yeah, I just saw men being portrayed in the media as leaders, but then also as perpetrators of crimes. So my mom watched Law and Order, and I would like come into the room and like see graphic things and get really stressed out. And the perpetrators were often male. You know, seeing news stories about rape or child abuse or abductions or kidnappings, like just so often it was male-bodied people. And to be fair, I was looking in the world for evidence to support something I already believed, right? So I was cherry picking information to support this idea that men were not to be trusted. we're still digging into why tiny childhood Olivia needed that to be true so bad. Done a lot of, therapy and hypnotherapy and all kinds of fun things to try to like dig into my mind and figure out where that came from. I don't know, folks, stay tuned. But the seed was there and I really cultivated it. And so I grew up believing that men were dangerous and couldn't be trusted. And I found lots of supporting evidence to keep that going. And it became debilitating because men are people and they are half the human race, and you bump into them multiple times a day. So, if you're a kid that grows up afraid of spiders, or if you're afraid of fire, like I had a friend who was terrified of her wood stove. I had friends who were afraid of deep water. There's all heights, of course, people are afraid of heights. There's all kinds of things that your child mind can decide. This is the one topic that really freaks me out. This is my Achilles heel. This is the one thing I can't handle. For my childhood friend, it was spiders. So for me, men became that. But men are everywhere, thank goodness. Men are good people now. I get that. But when I was a kid, they were everywhere and I was scared of them. So my kind of permeating level of anxiety was just really high. And I coped well. Like people thought I was very outgoing and friendly and kind, but inside of me, I knew this was just a facade. I was being two-faced. This was something I was presenting to the world, this really confident exterior self, to protect my vulnerable self who was terrified the entire time. So I think, when I share stories like these, my mom might be watching right now, or people who knew me as a kid, and they're like, I don't think you were afraid. It's like, where did this come from? I get that. I promise it's true. I had an experience inside of me that I didn't share with others, and it was utter terror. For like big chunks of my life were spent being really afraid. So we got to the point when did this all happen? I think I was 20 when I really realized that I spent way more time worrying about sexual violence than the average human being. And it came about kind of a nerdy way because I'm very nerdy. I like numbers. I like math. I like stuff that doesn't like move around on me. Math is very cut and dried. Like you add two numbers together, you get an amount. I love that. So I was being nerdy in college, and I was doing this pie chart, probably to avoid real homework. But I decided to make a pie chart about what I spent thinking about the amount of time I spent thinking about any given subject during the day. So I drew this big circle in my notebook, and a big wedge of pie is like thinking about school because I was a college student, and then a big wedge of pie was thinking about food because I love food, and like a decent chunk of pie was thinking about my friends and my relationships. A really embarrassing sliver was family because I was a young woman in college and I didn't want to think about my family. I wanted to be like independent and cool. And so I made this pie chart with like a 24-hour, like what I spent thinking about. And at the end, there was this little sliver left with nothing written in it. And I was like, well, maybe my math's off, like it's probably just got the math wrong and this pie chart is done. But I just intuitively knew that there was another topic that I thought about every day. And it ended up being like about a 2-hour chunk of time every day. And I was like, what do I think about for 2 hours? Like, it's a solid chunk of time. And my hand just wrote it in, just took the pen and just wrote it in my notebook, rape, 4 letters, R-A-P-E. I thought about sexual violence about 2 hours a day. And that was weird. It was weird to realize how much of my waking life I was spending worrying about something that had never happened to me and hopefully would never happen to me. And it's weird how the 2 hours, that's cumulative. So I'd be entering a public restroom and like check under all the stalls and worried that someone had come in behind me. And then the whole time I'm peeing, I'm like thinking about my exit strategy, my emergency plan. Riding my bike home from college, I'm like worried someone's going to jump out of the bushes. Laying in bed at night, like I'm worried I heard a sound. It all added up to 2 hours a day. of just worrying. Like, I felt so angry. I felt so upset that this topic had such a big hold on my life. Needless to say, it was really tricky to have romantic relationships. You know, when you don't, when you fundamentally believe that the person you're in love with and attracted to is not trustworthy, it makes for a really tricky relationship. And yeah, public shout out to my boyfriends at that time. Thank you all for being really good people and just being so patient with my hangups. Anyhow, so it became, at that moment, I was like, I'm going to do something. I am not going to be a 30-year-old woman who worries about rape for 2 hours a day. And I'm 20 right now, and I will figure this out in the next 10 years. I will. So I went on my first solo trip, which was not a bicycle trip, but it was a backpacking trip alone into Chile in South America. And I volunteered on organic farms, and it was wonderful. And I was riding the plane back home to the US, and I was like, I'm cured. I am not afraid of men anymore. I have like hitchhiked in a foreign country. I'm so good at this. I'm totally fine. And then I landed in the US and took public transit back home from the airport because I went to school near Portland, Oregon. And there was a guy on the train with a hoodie. You know, I couldn't see his face. And he smelled like booze, and he was kind of leering at me, like holding on to the little railing in the subway and like just like drawling weird stuff that drunk people drawl when they're drunk. And it was late at night, and I was so scared that I got off at the wrong stop. I just got off at the next stop. It was pouring rain. It was pitch black. I just busted out of the train and like ran down the sidewalk full tilt, just so afraid, like I needed to do something with all this adrenaline. And even as I'm like running down this urban street, I'm just feeling like hands are reaching out of the bushes. You know, I just felt like everybody was after me. And that's a feeling I've carried since childhood of just feeling like being born into a female body, you're born as prey. And that's something I've really worked hard to correct in my own mind over the years, but it's pretty tricky. Like that is permeating our society, that you don't get to choose your gender and you don't get to choose how people receive your gender. That's a lot. That's heavy. And that's on everybody. That's not just people who identify as women. That's absolutely the whole gender spectrum. We don't choose the bodies we're born into, and we don't choose how other people receive them. And that's a really hard truth, even to this day. Anyhow, so first solo trip, thought I was cured, wasn't. Decided to ride my bike across the United States. Realized that I had kind of only gotten over my fear in Central America, in that bubble. But my own country still totally freaked me out. And I couldn't handle guys in hoodies on subways, and I wanted to. I wanted to be able to handle that and not have it haunt me for 3 hours afterwards. So I decided to ride my bike from Oregon to Florida alone. And I took off school to do it, did a lot of research. Adventure cycling is a great resource, adventurecycling.org. And really decided that I was going to, it was honestly a do or die moment. And my mom was really uncomfortable with this, and I feel bad. I can admit it now because it was like almost 10 years ago. It was like 8 years ago. But it really was this contract with the universe. I was like, I am going to ride from Oregon to Florida, and I am either going to survive and give up my fear, or I'm going to die trying. There are just two outcomes of this bike tour. It was very an ultimatum with the universe of like, okay, are people this scary? You know, am I going to get hurt biking through Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Wyoming? There's just so many chances for someone to hurt me. Through the deep south, Arkansas, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, through some of the sketchiest places in the US, am I going to be okay or not? Show me. I'm done being worried about stuff that's not going to happen. Show me. And that trip was so formulative and so intense. And I definitely got scared and had some scary stuff along the way, but no, nobody hurt me. And every time I was in a scary situation, trusted my gut, got very vocal, got a little bit aggressive, and it always resolved itself. The person always remove themselves from my environment. Because, I mean, what's that cute, like Shakespeare quote? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Oh man, like I'm so nice, but you get me mad and I'm just so mad. I'm 5'7", like I'm kind of petite, but man, when I get mad, people clear the room. It's great. It's like this superpower. I'm very grateful for it. I'm sure it saved me a number of times on my travels. So I made it to Florida and I was okay. And that was wonderful. And it was tricky because I had already made a contract with myself that now I was going to release my fear forever. And I realized that I could to a point, but I couldn't release all of it because fear is natural and it's always going to be here. And we definitely live in a world where bad things happen. And so I realized that I was just going to have to learn to live with it and do exceptional things anyway. You know, just be an adventurer alone with fear. And so that's my personal story, and I'm really excited about Q&A. A couple things first. So this is the little like how-to portion of my presentation today. How do you work with fear? I have kind of like a bullet point list of things that really helped me. One of them is curb your daydreams. So those 2 hours a day that I spent worrying about rape, let's be honest, I was kind of fantasizing about rape. Like I was making up storylines and like following them to completion. You know, I'm going into the public restroom. Is someone coming in behind me? Oh, what would they do? What would I do? And I learned to curb the daydream, right? Like it's happening and I'm not good enough yet that I can just shut it down. So instead I'm like, and I turn around and I kick him in the nuts and he falls on the floor and it's done. Like it's resolved, it's over. We would, you know, I'm biking down the road and I'm starting to get the hair on the back of my neck standing up and I'm like, there's a truck slowing down next to me. What do I do? And you would just be like, then I stop my bike and I yell at them and they drive away all freaked out. Done. Moving on to the next subject. I tried to rein in my daydreams and tried to teach my brain to have very quick resolutions that were positive, to try and train my brain not to panic about these situations and to give myself some kind of confidence in the future. Instead of like going through gory details and picturing like my demise, I would picture everything being cool real quick. So that's number one for my personal bullet point list of how to cycle with fear. Another is to get more comfortable with meditation and just play with your brain. Realize that it's malleable and you can teach it things and you can clear it out and you can ask it to calm down. Breathing exercises has been really huge. What's that famous gentleman's name? Wim Hof. He has some great breathing methods. You know, he does cold water stuff, but Wim Hof has great breathing methods for just like getting back into your body and reducing anxiety that have been really helpful. Just being prepared, you know, doing your research ahead of time. And a big one of mine, which has like a lot of subcategories, don't get desperate. Number one rule of solo travel, don't get desperate. Because when you are desperate, the creepers know and you attract them like moths to a flame. Like you are always okay. I promise you're always okay and you have some control. When you panic is when you are vulnerable. When you are desperate is when people can swoop in and offer help and they're not the right people to accept help from. So I know that's kind of a scary thing to think about, but if you can stay calm and not get desperate, bring enough money on your trip, know your route, do a little research ahead of time. Just don't put yourself in a position where you are getting desperate. And, you know, there's always going to be times, I am totally guilty of this. I've had so many moments when I didn't set myself up for success and I've gotten desperate. But the more you can reduce those moments, the better, because I want you to always feel that you can refuse help. Only in true emergencies should you feel so desperate that you need to accept help from someone. It's always a choice. You should never be pushed to it. It's always like, oh, you seem like a great person. I would love to take you up on a place to stay. I would love to take you up on a snack. You know, it's a choice that you're making. It's not some corner you're getting backed into. Um, so yeah, those are some of my personal tips for cycling with fear. And this is probably going to come up in the Q&A, and I apologize, I don't have a great answer yet. Managing other people's fear is really hard. Like, you have people in your life who love you, and they're worried about you, and they're putting a lot of fear onto you and kind of asking you to help them manage their own emotions. Super common, totally normal, kind of hard to deal with. I don't have a very thick skin, so when my mom is worried about me, I'm all freaking out. It's really hard. But it gets easier with time, and just, especially if it's your first trip, it's really hard to be confident and say, you know, I think I got this. I did the research. I know the route. I think I'm going to be okay. It's really hard to be that confident on your first trip. And that's when people are most worried for you, because you haven't really proven yourself yet. They don't know you're capable of this. And you don't know you're capable of this. So I respect that that's a really tricky position to be in. And it's something I'm still pursuing. I kind of ask that question a lot when I interview young women. I'm like, and how do you manage other people's fear? Like, what do you do to help your mom feel okay, your loved ones feel okay, and just random strangers you meet not freak out that you're traveling alone? So that one's kind of a to be continued. Still working on that one. It's hard for me. Yeah, I think I feel good about what I've shared so far, and I'm really eager to hear your questions. I love humans. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Olivia. And thank you for like making this happen in between Airbnbs. I just can't imagine what you're going through right now. And I appreciate you just like pulling it together. I love hearing you speak.
Thanks. I like
Um,
talking.
I'm glad it helps. While we're waiting for people to put some questions in the chat, or if anyone wants to ask Olivia a question on video, I had a question for you. I remember you were writing about a long time ago in adventure cycling about just the upsides of vulnerability, and just this article that began with this story of, I think you were like outside a store and this woman asked you if you had a gun or if you were like carrying something. And I just think like all those questions that people ask are so funny, that like there's all these typical ones that people ask, like are you carrying a gun? Like, aren't you afraid you're going to get murdered? Like, there's all these ridiculous things. Um, Eric and I actually like laminated a list of all the answers to put on our handlebar bags so that we could like hand them out to strangers when they ask, so that we could like conserve our energy.
I love it.
But anyway, I was just like wondering if you remember any funny ones, and how if you have any go-to answers to them.
Oh, yeah. I remember that story. She said, "Are you packing?" And I couldn't put it together at first. I was like, packing what? Like, I'm carrying a lot, but packing. And she's like, a firearm. I was like, oh. And I just laughed. I was like, oh no, I'd be a danger to myself. Like, I'm not good at shooting things. I know I'm from Alaska, guys, but I have never shot a gun. I'm not real good with like explosives, fireworks, fire, flame. It just freaks me out. So I'm not great with guns. But I did carry pepper spray. So, there's that. I'd be like, oh yeah, I have pepper spray. And they're like, you're so young and like fragile looking, and I don't think you're okay. And I was like, thanks for that. I feel okay. And it got easier the longer you go, because then you can be like in Mississippi having people freak out for you, and you're like, I've come 4,000 miles. Like I'm not a newbie at this anymore. I've made it this far.
You feel good at that halfway point, right?
Yeah,
Like
you're like,
you've made it this far.
totally. But yeah, I had one woman in Mississippi, a stranger, say, "You're gonna get raped if you keep going." And to have like a stranger like just look you in the face and say your worst nightmare that you've been like traumatized about was so unsettling. It was like, okay. And she's like, "I'm gonna buy you a bus ticket back home. You shouldn't be here." Just straight up was like, "Your trip is over. You will get raped if you continue. We're buying you a bus ticket home." And there's so many expletives I want to say right now, because it's like, holy crap. Like, she is local. she might have been raped for all I know. You know, she's speaking from her own personal truth and she is trying to rescue me, and I am being a dumbass by not. That was a rough night. I laid in my tent and was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, what is this? But the contract with the universe held firm. We were either going to get to Florida or die trying. So I kept going, but that kind of feedback is so rough to get as a solo female traveler. Most people just hint at it. They're like, aren't you afraid something's going to happen? You know, like they just get, they kind of dodge it. But she said the word rape. Like that really freaked me out. And yeah, I just said, thank you, ma'am. I'll be careful. And I just kept moving because I, I don't know what you do with that. And I'm curious if anyone here has had similar experiences. I'd be really happy to hear about them because it's rough.
One question from Jade. Less about your cycling and more about your fear. Did you find that spending more time one-on-one with men and putting yourself in situations that you feared, did that help with overcoming fear?
Thank you. That's a really good question. Yeah, because I was doing this dehumanizing thing where I was making men not human. They were an other, they were an enemy. You know, it wasn't my job to make them happy or comfortable, right? I needed to be really strong in my boundaries and constantly like not giving them an inch. And so to spend more time one-on-one and see men as people, as human beings, worthy of friendship or at least of compassion and empathy was super important to my healing journey. So absolutely, one-on-one, you can't deny that someone is a human. It's really easy to lump each other together in groups, you know, like Republicans, Democrats, men, women. But if you sit down with a human being, they're Jerry or like Evan or whoever. So it's, yeah, absolutely. One-on-one is really important to overcome any fear. You know, if you need to hang out in more deep water to get over deep water, hang out with more spiders to get over spiders, it's exposure therapy in a way. And that's different for everybody. I apologize. I just made that sound really cut and dried. I am not a therapist. But yeah, so it was a bit of exposure therapy one-on-one.
Were there any moments where you like felt like the person was sketchy at first, but then you kind of overcame that? Or any memorable people you met along the way?
There was a weird one. I don't think he was trustworthy, but I did. It is so strange. I I wake up one morning in Montana. If any of you are adventure cyclists, you might have been through Dillon, Montana, and you wouldn't know it other than they have a really nice bike shelter. It's kind of famous for like the bike shelter and the infrastructure there. It's a really small town. But I was in Dillon staying at the bike camp, and I remember the screen door shut behind me, and I turn around and I see this kind of short guy with like weird hair and sunglasses, and he said, "Olivia, I've been expecting you." I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, I have no idea who this dude is. I just got here yesterday. He just used my name. And he was like, yeah, you're Olivia. You're just as beautiful as I knew you would be. And I was like, oh, we are like, this is, we're, like, I just get all fiery back here. It's kind of like I have wings, like they just spread on my back. I'm like, what are we talking about? I'm about to murder you if you can't give me an example. So he was really weird, said he was a Russian mystic and psychic, and he knew my name. Pretty sure I got my knife out at that point and was like, how do you know my name? We are not playing. And he was all apologetic, and he's like, oh, I just talked to a guy who was staying here yesterday, and he said you'd be coming. So, adventure cyclists, please protect each other. Do not tell random strangers that someone else is going to be coming through the next day. Please don't do that. But yeah, so it was just another cyclist who had notified him the night before that someone named Olivia was going to be staying at the camp, and that she was a single woman traveling alone. Great info. Okay, the worst part is this homeboy who gave this information, ex-cop, knows better. Former policeman, knows how valuable information like that is, gave it anyway. Anyhow, we're over it. It was a long time ago. So it put me in this really weird position, but I just basically was like, GTFO, you're out of here. I don't want to talk to you, which went well. He left. So I had this really freaky interaction with him, right? The Russian mystic. He said he was a Russian mystic and he was psychic. He finally left, and I'm like shaking and all torn up inside and like having one of my famous panic attacks, and I go into town to like be around other humans and be away from that bike camp because I just don't feel safe there anymore. I go grocery shopping. I meet a new little friend who's like 8 years old. We hang out for the rest of the afternoon. She was wonderful. And then I go back to the bike camp that night because that's where all my stuff is. And these other cyclists I know who are kind of traveling the same direction as me, when you're on an established bike route, you get to leapfrog with great people a lot. You get to keep seeing them. They take a rest day, but then you take a rest day and they catch up. It's really nice. So I saw them and we're making dinner together. I'm just excited to have friends. I'm so happy not to be alone. Russian Mystic comes back. The nerve. Like, he comes back to the bike camp and he's given the same story to these guys that he's a Russian mystic and he's psychic. And they are laughing and slapping him on the back and being like, this dude, so funny. And I'm like, he was such a threat. Like, he was the scariest person in my universe, like just a few hours ago. And you guys are just laughing and thinking he's entertaining. And I was like, am I crazy? Like, I just felt so confused. So to answer your question, I think there probably were a lot of people that I gave the cold shoulder to who didn't deserve it, but I never gave them another chance. You know, like I never saw them again, which is a good thing. I don't want to see them again. If they're good people, they will stay away, right? Like any of us, if someone tells any of us to go away, we would like to go away and not interact with them anymore. That's kind of rude. So, you know, only the creepers are going to come back for round two. That's a sign. If you tell someone to go away and they come back, like you are getting out the pepper spray. It's time.
Yeah, I'm thankful that I've never had to use my pepper spray. But it's good to go with your gut. I think you did the right thing.
Thanks.
uh,
I guess he might
a,
be like a famous character there. He might say hi to every cyclist. Just a lonely
yeah,
man.
maybe. Kate has a question. You must have met other bicyclists on your ride. Did you find male bicyclists scary, or because they were fellow cyclists, did you feel more safe?
That's a good question. I was still totally scared. Um, there was one male cyclist that I actually ended up having a crush on, which is complicated to admit because I was still in a monogamous, faithful relationship with my boyfriend at the time. My boyfriend was just in Oregon while I did this trip alone. But I had feelings for someone who kind of popped up out of nowhere, and we cycled together for a couple days. Um, and that's something I'm exploring in my book, is this ability to be afraid of something and attracted to it at the same time. It's a very weird thing to feel in your body, but that was my experience with males, with men, is I was capable of feeling attracted to them while simultaneously being terrified. Um, I don't think that's that uncommon. I think a lot of us are attracted to things that are dangerous or bad for us. Not that men are bad for us, but I believe that at the time. So yeah, I used a lot of caution. Really didn't want to camp with solo male cyclists unless I had spent like the whole day with them and really got a good vibe. And even then, I'm keeping my satellite beacon in my tent with me and my pepper spray and my knife, and just waking up at every little sound during the night. Had a really hard time being calm when I was left alone with a male-bodied person at that time in my life. But yeah, I'd say, you know, if we cycled the whole day together and they just seemed really genuine and were giving me good information about who they were and I could picture them more as a human by the end of the day, I could potentially camp near them, but equipped still for sure.
Marissa asks, how would you decide where to stay? Where are certain places you felt more or less safe staying?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I just interviewed Jasmine Reese. Gosh, was it Thursday night? It goes by so fast. She was really cool. She did the 6-month trip and she only had to camp twice. Like, that's how many human connections she made and how many times she was invited into other people's homes. I really admire that. That is really cool. I was pretty wary of being invited into someone's house, and of course, my rule, don't get desperate, means I did plan out my accommodations a little bit. I would plan, you know, campsite to campsite was my route for the day. I stealth camped maybe 2 or 3 nights during that trip. Stealth camping is when there is no campsite and you just pull into a place that looks secluded and set up your tent. I never slept well. And I would just have kind of a garbage day the next day because I didn't sleep well, and I was really stressed and fatigued. And so that was part of Don't Get Desperate too, was like get a good sleep at night. So I really planned out campsite to campsite. And when I couldn't, I would try to find Airbnb, or not Airbnb, warm showers hosts in the area, which is like the Airbnb for cyclists. Warm showers is bicycle people hosting bicycle people. Very good resource. Um, I have only heard one horror story. They're out there, but they're very rare. You can also leave reviews for your hosts and reviews for guests. So it's kind of a way to verify that people are solid. Um, but yeah, I stayed with some warm showers hosts. And by the end of my trip in Florida, I actually stayed with 2 different men. Like I stayed with Chase and then I stayed with Brian, and I was their only guest and they lived alone. Huge, huge moment for Olivia to be able to like reside in a man's house who's a stranger, but verified on warm showers. And both of them were really positive experiences and really good for my healing. But it took me 5 months to work up to that. It took a long time for me to feel okay about that. So I'd look for female hosts or families. I really like people and I love talking, and solo travel is really lonely. So I didn't mind the extra logistics of scheduling warm showers. I liked having somebody to feed me. There's lots of good food in warm showers, and tell my stories too. And kind of, they're local cyclists, so they know the weather patterns, they know local routes. It's just a really good resource, even if you don't stay with them, to just reach out to local cyclists along the way. So, I would have liked to use it more often. It was very rare in some areas where I traveled. The deep south, along the Mississippi River is pretty poor area in the United States, and cycling tends to be still, unfortunately, a kind of a wealthier pastime. So not as many warm showers hosts along the Mississippi River, but lots of campgrounds. So that was okay.
Yeah, I love warm showers. I feel like I've met so many friends through it. And even 2 of our speakers tomorrow, Sonny and Dale, who are cycling with deafness. I met Sonny in Colorado at a warm showers, and then I ended up hosting him in New York the next year. So
That's
it's
so
great, the
cool.
connections that you make. Let's see if there's any other questions. Oh, someone was saying that they live in Alaska and their biggest fear is the bears.
That's a
Tracy.
much better fear.
Yeah, how are you? Typical fear of just, because I feel like I've only camped alone a few times. I feel like that's one of my biggest fears is just camping alone. Did you have to get over that fear too?
Yeah, it's tricky every time, honestly. So I've done more bicycle tours after that first one, as Annalisa knows. More than 7,000 miles by now of solo bike trips. And yeah, I have to do my meditation and clear my brain and curb my fantasies every time. But it's a good practice, and I'd say I get the rest I need, but I do sleep better in like a guest room, knowing that someone's not gonna sneak up in the middle of the night. But the feeling of waking up in the morning after you've camped alone, you feel like a total badass. It's like, you're like, I made it. I'm still here. Everything's fine. The birds are singing. Like, yes, I did it. So that's kind of worth it.
Oh, someone was asking about if warm showers is happening in the middle of, the coronavirus. I feel like some people are, but just with precautions.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they might be offering more like camping in their lawn kind of thing, which is still nice.
Right.
Like you have a
Yeah.
sanctioned place to be, and maybe they'll let you run in and use the restroom. But maybe, and yeah, but I think there might be less hosts or more stipulations, but I bet there's still a few people hosting on there.
Yeah. I'm actually going on a short bike trip next week and I'm going to be camping in friends' backyards along the way.
Yay! Yeah, there's lots
Um,
of like friend backyard camping stuff going on now, which I'm really inspired by, because it was always kind of dorky before COVID, but now it's a necessity. But I've always liked it.
exactly. I have a question, another one. Is there any moments of type 2 fun that you'd like to share? This is like a question that I've been asking everyone, but if people don't know what type 2 fun is, it's something that's like fun to look back on, but miserable at the time.
Yeah. Oh gosh, like the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
um, I always thought it was funny when people were like, "But aren't you afraid?" And I'd be like, "That's kind of the point." Like, yes, terrified, and that is the reason I'm here. Like, we are here because we are scared. So yeah, a lot of things. You know, I grew up in a part of Alaska that doesn't get a lot of lightning. And I was rolling through, the northern US in like August and early September. There were so many lightning storms. And they were so beautiful, but like wondering if you were going to die the whole time just like made it a little less beautiful. But the memories are amazing because it's like this giant camera in the sky because it's so pitch black. You can't see anything. And then like, shaka, the flash happens and it's like it took a photo of the world before it descends back into darkness, and you can see the snapshot like it got imprinted in your retinas or whatever because of that flash. So it's like ka-cha, 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 like taking photos of this world. Oh man, lightning is such a trip. And yeah, I wonder if I could have more fun now, like if I went back and did the trip again, if I could be like, oh, what a beautiful landscape, and like just really enjoy it more, because my paranoia is lower than it used to be. But yeah, type 2 fun is what bicycle touring is all about.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the definition of bike touring is type 2 fun.
There is some stuff that's fun at the moment, I'm sure. Um, and yeah, meeting people, just getting this intimate glimpse into their lives. Oh, Annalisa mentioned, so I wrote a piece about um, something, I can't remember the title now, but it's the upsides of being vulnerable. Because that's the cool part about being a solo female traveler is you are not seen as a threat. Overall, you are in need of protection in a lot of people's eyes. And so when you show up somewhere, you get kind of a deeper invitation, whereas someone might see a man traveling alone and say something like, do you need a bottle of water? Do you need a snack? They see me traveling alone, they're like, do you need a place to stay? They offer a deeper invitation because I am not seen as threatening. And so being seen as vulnerable might make us a target, but it also makes us the recipient of deeper generosity. So I would say the two cancel out. And it is just as safe for a lady to go out, at least in the US, as it is for a man, because those two have canceled out in my experience. And I've had some male friends who relayed their experience of bicycle touring to me, and they were kind of jealous about the perks I was being offered as a solo female. They're like, nobody ever says that to me. Nobody ever offers that to me. And I was like, well, it evens out because I'm freaked out the whole time, but glad you're jealous.
And also, when you're traveling alone rather than in a pair, you have more conversations because you're alone.
Yeah, yeah, you're kind of available constantly for
Right.
conversation. On a bike, you're not closed in, so people can be like, hey, how are you? Like from the sidewalk, you just direct line of communication.
Exactly. Yeah, I have this vivid memory of the end of my Trans-America cross-country trip a few years ago, where I was staying at a campsite on the Pacific Ocean somewhere, and this man who was like, we were all around this campfire talking to other people at the campground, and this man was like, yeah, I saw you on the road, and I was like about to pull over because I thought like something was wrong. That's the automatic like assumption that if a woman is alone, something must be wrong, as you
Yeah,
said. But
totally. They're like, where's the other
incredible.
person who's with you? Where's your
Yeah,
escort? You
something's
know, I
missing.
I wonder if you had this, but I had this tricky thing where my bike doesn't have a kickstand. So when I leave it unattended, it has to be like on its side. And I have to pee constantly, right? So I lean my bike on the side of the road and run away into the bushes. And very well-meaning motorists like see a bicycle on its side and they slow down and they're like peering into the woods. You're like trying to figure out where you are. And you're like, don't look. Like I'm trying to go to the bathroom. Please keep driving. I had to like I thought about leaving a note on my bike, like, she's peeing, just keep driving. You're all good. Sorry the bike's on its side. It looks
Gone
like an
peeing.
accident. Yeah.
You also have to be careful if you want to take a nap on the side of the road that you do it so that it doesn't look like you died.
I've never even been tempted to because that would totally do that. You wouldn't get an ounce of sleep. People would be slowing down all the time.
Right, exactly. Cool. Well, I think we're gonna end it here. I have one more question for you, which is also something that I've been asking everyone. Just if you have one message to give to a woman who's on the fence about like adventure cycling, what that message would be and why you ride.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Marie. I see Marie called Tech. That's
Oh,
great. Marie found me through my website, which is really cool.
oh no.
Yeah, I really want to thank you all for being here. Just personally, this has been such a rough month. Wildfires, COVID, stuff, moving, and it's really, I just am so honored that you all tuned in tonight and got to listen to me ramble. I love talking, so please reach out if you want to talk more about solo travel or biking. I also love writing. So if you like anything I've written, just let me know. Writing is very solitary. It's way harder than solo bike touring. You get a lot less feedback along the way. So just let me know if any of this is helpful. It really helps me keep doing the work. And I really believe that the answer to fear is getting to know each other one-on-one and spending time with yourself and listening to your gut. And I just respect everybody who tuned in tonight. And I'm really honored to be part of your journey in this very small way. And yeah, just remember fear is normal and okay. And don't beat yourself up about it. Do great things anyway.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for taking your time. It's great to hear from
Absolutely.
you. um, so for anyone who wants to find you, you're on Instagram. If you want to give your handle and like wherever people can find you.
Yeah, best way is my website, which is just my name, oliviaround.com. But yes, Instagram is good too. That's at Olivia Round Bikes, Bikes.
Cool. And Olivia has been writing a memoir for a long time now, and I've actually like seen a peek at her proposal, and it's just absolutely amazing. Like I can just vouch for her being an incredible writer. And if there's any book agents out there, like get in touch. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. We have two more interviews left tomorrow. The first one is at 2:30 p.m. EST with Mark Rowland, who is a member of our what we call trail family, someone we met on the Trans-America Trail. And he's going to talk about how meditation and yoga and cycling have helped him through that. And then that's going to be followed by Sani and Dale, who I mentioned earlier, who I met through Warm Showers, and they're both deaf cyclists. So we're going to do the whole interview through an ASL interpreter. So hopefully you guys can come for that. Thank you all so much.
Bye, good
Bye.
night.
Good night.